A JPanel container object is a generic storage area for components. If you have a complicated window with lots of components, you may want to compartmentalize them by storing groups of components in JPanel containers. JPanel containers are particularly useful with grid layout and border layout windows because each compartment in those layouts can only store one component. If you need a compartment to store more than one component, let that one component be a JPanel container, and then you can put multiple components into that JPanel container. When using a JPanel container, do these things. First, we need to make sure that the JPanel class is imported, and we do that by using the javax.swing package. Then we need to instantiate a JPanel object. And we can either specify a layout manager, or we can use the default flow layout. Once we have the panel instantiated, we can add components by calling the add method, passing the component as a parameter. And finally, we add our panel to the frame. Of course, if we're using the border layout with either the frame or the panel we are working with, then we need to specify which region we are going to send it to as a parameter as well. Okay? And you're going to see this occur over and over as a common theme. You're going to create the container or the panel, and then you're going to add the components to it, and then you're going to add the panel to the other components. So all the components and all the setup that we do, it follows this kind of standard process. Let's take a look at a concrete example. Say we want to create the top left panel in the math calculator demo program that we showed earlier. Here's how we would go about doing it. Right? First, we create a new JPanel specifying a flow layout, and we're saying that we want the flow layout to be centered, right? Then on that panel, we add a label and we add the box, right? And then we add the X panel to the frame. Right, so this method right here belongs to the J frame itself, and so we are going to add this panel to it, right? And of course that frame has a grid layout applied, so it's going to fill the first one, which is the top left component. So here's the entire math calculator program. We import our usual stuff, we extend the J frame, we set some height and width parameters. And then we have these text fields that we're going to use to input data or output data. And then we call our very typical constructor here, setting the title, the width, the default close, the contents, and then we set it to visible as its final operation, right? So in the create contents method, which is the bulk of what we're doing here, you can see that we are creating a panel. Right? We're creating 4 different panels here. Well, we're creating 3 panels and a label, right? And then we're also creating 2 buttons and a listener, right? And these are just, remember, these are just reference variables. We're not doing anything with them yet. Now we are setting our grid layout for our frame. So we're creating a 2x2 layout just as we had shown earlier. And we're creating a label called X colon, right? And then we're creating a new text field called Xbox. And then we are creating a new X panel, right? Well, that's the name of it, using a flow layout that's centered. And then we're adding the layout, we're adding the label and the box, which is the text field, to the panel, right? Then we are creating the square root panel. So we're creating a button, we're creating a box, we're allowing you to not change the values of it. So this is going to be used for output only. Right? And then here we're creating another panel, but we're setting the flow layout to right justified. And then we're adding the button and the box to that panel. Then we have the logarithm panel where we're doing much of the same. And then finally we're adding those panels to the window. Right? If you notice here, we're creating a blank JLabel component because this is used to fill up that bottom left panel that we don't really need anything, right? So we're just creating a blank label to fill that spot. Finally, we create a new action listener that we are going to define as a private inner class, and we're going to add that listener to both the square root button and the logarithm button. And this is just going to calculate the values, but first it's going to do some input validation, right? And so you can see, I'm not going to run through all this, but basically if it was clicked on by the square root of x button, then we're going to calculate the square root of x after doing some input validation, right? And if it was calculate the logarithm, then we're going to calculate the logarithm, okay, using a format string. Okay, and then we simply instantiate the new thing. So pretty straightforward. We compile it, we run it, and of course it's really small. And there's ways to adjust the DPI setting on this. Maybe I'll do a separate video and show you how to adjust that. I did it on my laptop, but I haven't done it on my desktop computer yet. But basically, simply we type in a value, say 10, and we hit square root, right? And or we can say, what's the logarithm of it? It's 1. Okay. So what if we do 49? Calculate the square root. All right, square root of 49 is indeed 7, and the logarithm is 1.69. What if we put in negative 10, right? Square root. It's undefined, right? Because you can't have a negative square root. Then you start getting into imaginary numbers, and we're not really doing that. And you can't have a negative logarithm, okay? So, or if we could put in letters, right? Simply says undefined. Or if we type 0, right? Square root of 0 is 0. Logarithm of 0 is apparently negative infinity. So that's it. That's how we use the grid and the flow layouts together to create a more complex GUI. The JLabel component works great for displaying a single line of text. But for displaying multiple lines of text, like this, you should use a JTextArea component. And in this demo, we have two areas. We've got the JTextArea, which is this part, and then of course the JText or the JCheckbox component below, which we're going to cover in a little bit. To create a JTextArea component, you call the JTextArea constructor like we've seen on many other objects that we've created. It's kind of the same thing, right? And the displayed text is the text that appears in the JTextArea component. If the argument is omitted, then no initial text will be displayed, as you can see here and here, right? The size of the text or the JTextArea component is the size of the container that it's contained in, right? So it will fill whatever object that you assign it to. The JTextArea class, like all GUI component classes, have quite a few methods, and so here's some of the more common ones. Right, getText will return the text that is inside of the text area. setText will set the text that's in the text area. setEditable will flag the component to whether a user can type in the text area or not. And setLineWrap and setWrapStyle will turn on line wrapping just like you have a notepad, where it'll return overflow elements. So like if the border was right here, or off would be moved to the next line, right? And then WordWrapStyle just says if it's allowed to break up a word or not. So. Okay, for the last demo in this video, we're going to take a look